specific to that item, you are welcome to stay for the rest. You're also welcome to leave should you wish to do so. Moving on to item 8 on the agenda, which is Edinburgh Gate Car Park.
The application before you seeks planning permission for the erection of 361 dwellings and associated development on the existing car park to Pearson House. The site is shown edged in red here. The star shows the approximate position of the application site. The town park is to the south of Edinburgh Way, Mill Court, the multi-storey car park and the train station are nearby to the west. This plan is from our current local plans proposals map. I've included this for reference for later on in the presentation. So it's important to know the extent of the green wedge, which is coloured in solid light green, and the extent of the conservation area, which is marked by the red line. The proposed development is shown on this slide. Pearson House is located to the east of the site. So it is. My cursor's gone, but it's the big white rectangular building there. There are two proposed buildings separated by a central avenue. So you see the blocks that are labelled A, B, C, D, and E. There's an avenue between the two of those. The northern building would include the 3 blocks, which are A, B, and C, and the southern building, the D and E. There would be courtyards at second floor level between the blocks. There would also be landscaping around the perimeter of the site, along that central avenue, and to the east of Block E. And conditions would ensure that new planting is maximised. The first 2 storeys of those buildings would be primarily for access, parking and waste collections. The proposal would exceed the parking standards for disabled and cycle parking. 42% of the standard and visitors parking requirement is proposed for both the new development and Pearson House. There are a number of facilities near to the site and the train station. The taxi rank and bus interchange are close by, and the level of parking provision is considered to be acceptable in that context. That's particularly the case given that the nearby scheme at 1-7 Burnt Mill was approved by committee most recently with 36% of the standard and visitor parking provision. There's an existing signalised crossing to the town park nearby, and a new crossing island is proposed as part of this application. The Highway Authority has confirmed that both the proposed development and the residential use of Pearson House would generate less traffic movement than when Pearson House was in use as an office building. The northern and southern elevations of all 5 blocks are shown here. Block B, which is in the middle of the northern building on the left-hand side, is the tallest element at 11 storeys. It's also worth pointing out, since the elevations are up, that a contribution towards public arts of up to £50,000 has been included as part of this proposal, and that would potentially be to secure a high-quality elevational treatment along the ground floor of those buildings there. The blocks would cascade downwards towards the edges of the site. The upper storeys would also be recessed, mitigating the impact of the height of the proposal. There would also be contrasting use of materials and features such as balconies to break up the mass of the buildings and provide interest, and urban design at Essex County Council is on the whole supportive of the scheme. This is actually one plan which obviously has had to be split up to show you on the slides, and it shows the height of the development along Elizabeth Way and Edinburgh Way more clearly. Importantly, the height of the approved development at 1-7 Burnt Mill is included, and the dashed line across the top of both plans, which hopefully I can show you if my cursor works. Here we are. So you see there's the burnt mill scheme there, and you can see the dashed line that carries across on the bottom section there, so you can see how the heights would differ. It also shows obviously the adjacent buildings along there and the proposed development, which is on the bottom section, and it shows that the heights of those buildings would be lower than the approved scheme of burnt mill. And it's considered the height of the proposed development would be comparable with Pearson House and would fit in with the development along Elizabeth Way and Edinburgh Way, particularly when viewed in that longer context. And to try and demonstrate that, here are some photographs. So these are taken from the greenway to the north of the site, and it's considered that within the context of the existing tall developments, the railway line and the train station, that the height and amount of development is appropriate. At the bottom you can see a computer generated image of what the proposed development would look like in this context. These photos are taken from within the town park in the green wedge, but outside of the conservation area. It's clear that the park is characterised as a green space with development at its boundaries. The proposed development, which would infill a gap between the buildings along Edinburgh Way, would fit into its surroundings in this context. You might not be able to pick up clearly in the bottom photo, but that's the blue there is actually the Go Outdoors and associated development over the east side of the park. So it is surrounded on all sides by development. The middle and bottom photos here show longer distance views of the site and the conservation area. The top photo shows the extent of the proposed buildings outlined in red. Again, I'm not sure how clearly you'll be able to see it up there, but the extent of the proposed building is there. In the main, the proposed developments would have a limited impact on the setting of the conservation area, particularly in these wider views, with the development disconnected from the conservation area by changes in topography and intervening landscaping. And that's what the top photo is trying to show with that red outline. There would be a greater impact to the conservation area in closer proximity to the proposed developments, particularly towards the bottom of School Lane, and that's shown on those two photos there. It is, however, considered that these impacts are localised to this sort of close range area. It must also be noted that whilst the proposal would cause some harm to the conservation area, these views are already occupied by Pearson House and sometimes by Mill Court, and landscaping in between mitigates the impacts. The Heritage Officer at Essex County Council concludes that the development would result in less than substantial harm to the conservation area, and the level of harm within that category would be at the lower end of less than substantial. The proposed development would be able to provide the requested contributions towards education and healthcare, and it could provide 12.2% affordable housing provision without undermining the viability of the scheme significantly. And national guidance and appeal decisions have made it clear that refusing applications for not providing any more affordable housing in that scenario is unreasonable. The Environment Agency has confirmed that flood risk will not be increased elsewhere as a result of the development, and details of measures have been included within both the committee report and within the application, which set out how flood risk, which would mainly affect the northern building, would be managed. Both the flood risk and the lower scale, less than substantial harm to the conservation area must be balanced against the benefits of the scheme. The NPPF sets out support for use of underutilised land, such as car parks in general, and the redevelopment of land is considered to be a community benefit. The proposal features a range of other benefits, including making efficient use of brownfield land for residential development, providing affordable housing, and there's the contributions towards education and NHS. There's the new crossing, the contribution towards public art, all of which weigh in favour of the scheme. In addition, as set out by the owners of Mill Court, which were in the report, it's considered that the vitality around the train station area could be improved as a result of this proposal, and because a clawback mechanism is proposed within the 106 agreement, there could be additional benefits more long term if property values increase, and that could translate into more affordable housing. And it's also considered that the proposal would be befitting of the ambitious scale of development that the council seeks to promote. So it's therefore considered that the application should be approved, subject to the applicant entering into an appropriately worded legal agreement and the conditions and informatives set out at pages 58 to 63 of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We have 3 speakers on this item, so could I call Mr. Rucco forward first, please? I hope I managed to pronounce your name right. Apologies.
Should we try the Christian name, Migueli, like Michelle, so you might have called me a lady.
Could have done. I would have got that name right, so. Anyway.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a resident opposite this development, so I'm here as an objector from that point of view. I'm also here as an objector from the Town Park User Group, which asked me to represent them today. Firstly, from my own point of view, I'm concerned about the additional traffic from this development. I've read the report from this, and it said it's not going to be any more than the development of the office block, but it will be. There's no doubt about that. Not only because the residents, but also visitors. I'm concerned also about the development. Your planning officer did say that the height of the building has been adjusted and it will not affect the conservation of the town park. He took the photograph from the south part of the town park, not the north part of the town park, which is over on the riverside. And that will certainly affect the skyline of the town park. So that hasn't been adjusted, and that will not be adjused. The development of E and D, that's the one by the snooker club, the development's right on the boundary of the site, which will obviously affect the opposite dwellings, because the height of the building will be affected by traffic noise across that road. Also, the situation will be aggravated. I understand that Edinburgh Way is going to be made dual carriageway in the near future. Now, if that is the case, where is the extra land coming from for the dual carriageway? If that development is right on the boundary of the site, then it can't be taken there because there'll be a building there. So they might be considered taken from the town park itself, which is obviously what none of us want to share, the effect of our own town park. So I think that's a bad thing. Pearson's office block is some 3 or 4 metres back from the edge of Edinburgh Way, where this is not, it's right on the edge of Edinburgh Way. So if anything, if the development does go ahead, it should be put back to the sight line of Pearson's premises. I have no more to say about that other than say the open space for this development is not sufficient, because you've got 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom flats there that's bound with children. How much space is there going to be available for recreation of those children? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have one speaker for the development, which is Mr. Noble. Mr. Noble here. Yep.
charter surveyor with the discretionary control over Harlow Court, which is the prominent 5-storey mixed-use building directly opposite the station and adjacent to the proposals from Western Homes. I'm here today to support the application because I believe it will create a more vibrant environment around the station, which I think from my perspective is a positive thing, but also from years back I attended a meeting with Harlow Renaissance, and their objective was to try and create a much better and more lively environment around the station site. It was the 50th anniversary, I think about 6 years ago, but it was the objective of Harlow Railway to try and create that activity. We have, since the building was, the mill court was built, we have severely struggled to keep that property viable. And the local businesses that have set up there have really struggled. I don't know if any of you remember there was a convenience store that was there, which subsequently shut down. We had a dry cleaners there, which couldn't make it work, and they shut down. We've had some units that have been vacant there for over 10 years. And it really just sits outside of what the Harlow Renaissance we're trying to achieve. You've got the listed building there, it's a gateway site to the station, and we really want it to work as a viable environment for the station. We think that the proposals which Western Homes are moving forward, together with the current Pearson Education building, cumulatively they will make a big difference to that station environment, and it'll become a lot more activity, a lot more movement, and we'll, I think the interlinking with the home park would be a positive thing, and altogether I think it would make a much better station environment. And really that's all I have to say. Just mention that although the units are now trading, some of them are struggling, and I think they really would benefit from increased activity. And if we don't have increased activity, they may shut. And it's a very prominent site, that mill court building directly opposite the station, and nobody wants to see those boarded up or turned to industrial storage use as an alternative use.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Noble, thank you. Mr. Hatton, if you would come forward. Again, you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Steve Hatton, and I'm the Planning and Design Director for Western Homes. For those of you not familiar with our business, we're a family-run developer based in Essex with our head office near Stansted Airport. I would like to stress that we're not a faceless investment company from another part of the country. We're a local company that employs local people, and we invest in the communities where we work and where our staff live. We build around 1,000 homes a year in the southeast of England and mainly specialise in urban brownfield regeneration schemes. We don't have standard house types, and every scheme, such as the one before you today, is bespoke for the site and the community in which it's built. I'm not going to repeat the well-presented report from your officers, which we fully endorse, but I would like to add that we've engaged extensively with your planning team and other relevant consultees, such as the Environment Agency and Essex Place Services. These discussions have taken place for well over a year, both pre-application and during the submission itself, and have helped to refine the proposals and create a high-quality scheme that we all can be proud of. Considering that our business has been running for over 30 years, it surprises me that we've only built one scheme in Harlow before. We're incredibly excited about this opportunity and eager to invest in the town, which has fantastic amenities such as the town park, great transport links, cycle networks, and fantastic employment opportunities. We hope that our scheme will add to the vibrancy of the area around the town station and to the town as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members? Councillor Carter.
Thank you. Just a hopefully simple question. I notice there are provisions for electric two-wheel recharging electric two-wheel vehicles. I wonder if there's any provision for disabled scooters and so forth for the charging environment.
We don't have a specific policies at the moment to do with any form of electric charging vehicles. I think part of the problem with that is we don't have clear internationally in terms of what levels of provision we should provide. So we haven't required those spaces to be built in that form. I think it's obviously good if the developer wants to propose those spaces, but we haven't got anything to require it. There's provision for standard power to wheeler spaces, but I don't think there are dedicated spaces for charging electric vehicles other than those car spaces which are shown on the plans.
Chair, if I may continue, regardless of whether there are the national standards, it doesn't mean to say that they should be ignored. They should be encouraged as part of the accessible buildings requirements. Again, it's in statute, one of the outside, it's just good practice. Equally, new developments which are covered up in the new local plan should also be thinking about recharging units for electric cars, which are growing at a phenomenal rate. And these, and if developers are trying to make a good impression, these are the kind of things that we'll be thinking about.
Thank you, Councillor Carson. Councillor Hardwood.
Three questions, Chair. First one, you spoke in your report about having agreed to a low level of affordable housing with arguments put forward due to the viability of the whole project. Can you just run through what kind of research or questions you've asked about viability, and also what's the point where you reassess that going forward?
So for the past few large-scale major developments, we've used the Valuation Office Agency's property arm, which is called DVS, and they're experts who only deal with local authorities about advising whether the viability of schemes are, or whether schemes are viable. So obviously it's very technical, I don't know the ins and the outs of that process, but we have used them before and accepted the conclusions. They also advised in terms of how the clawback mechanism would work, so they were involved in the application for the regeneration of the town park, and that had a clawback mechanism in it. In terms of when the clawback kicks in and when the reviews are for that, I think it was if they, within 18 months of commencement, and then after they've delivered a certain proportion of the units, so there's two stages to it to see whether the values have changed and therefore whether there's any additional, whether viability is such that a proportion of the revenue can then be converted into more affordable housing. But I don't have that in front of me, so I don't know the specifics more than that.
Thank you. My second question, again, relates to car parking, where again you've agreed a lower level of car parking within the building. Could you just remind us of what the standard is and what level you've agreed with, i.e. how much below it, and your reasoning for it?
Okay, so the parking standards say that a one-bed unit should have one parking space and a two or more bed should have two parking spaces, and that there should also be a parking space for every four, a visitor's parking space for every four dwellings. But it says all of that must be weighed in the context of the location. If it's in a sustainable location or with good access to facilities, etc., a reduction in that standard is allowed. So we've gone through in the report, basically because of its location next to the train station, bus interchange, taxi rank, accessibility to Mill Court, for example. It's in a sustainable location and therefore we can accept a reduction. The level of reduction assessed against the total standards for both Pearson House and the proposed development is 42% of the standard and visitor parking requirement. In terms of acceptability for that, we have had appeals at, so I mentioned in the presentation, the scheme of 1 to 7 Burnt Mill. That was refused in part for parking issues, and we lost that appeal on the basis of, I think that was 42% as well. But since then, the committee approved an additional additional units at that scheme, which then equated to 36% against the standards for that site. And that site and this site are in a similar setting.
And my final question concerns the local consultation. I think you said there's 120 letters were sent out, and you've received, I think, 10 representations. How many of those were objections?
So there was 8 objections from local residents, and there was a representation in support from Mill Court, and the Civic Society also objected, so that's how we got to 10.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. What provision is there for supervising who parks in these parking spaces? It seems to me there's potential for all sorts of trouble. Either they're open to anyone and all sorts of people will go and park in there, including people commuting by driving to the station and leaving their car there all day, and if the owner of the parking space comes home early or wishes to do anything else, they will find their space blocked. I also foresee that if you only allow in the people who live there to park, what about their visitors?
So the onus really for controlling the parking would be something for the management company of those blocks, or for the individuals. Obviously, if people are buying units and they're finding that people using the train station are taking up those spaces, then I would expect the management company or whoever's been selling those flats to make sure that there is an arrangement that ensures that those who are entitled to their parking space have their parking space. Disabled parking will be marked up as such, so there shouldn't be an issue in that respect either.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Susan.
Thank you, Chair. Can you give us an idea of the standard for the cladding that's going to be on the outside?
I don't know the standard of the claddings because that's dealt with through the building regulations process. For these types of applications, of which now we've had a few, we've been consulting with the fire service, and they've always said that they will consider those matters at building regulations stage. And our building regs team will be influencing that in terms of the standard of those materials. And in terms of the appearance of the materials, which is more the planning side of things, there's a condition that requires samples and details of all that to be submitted.
Thank you. Second question, is there a sprinkler system in these blocks?
I don't know. I would assume so, because they normally are for these blocks, but again, that's something that is raised in it's something that's raised by the fire service, and they say that all of that's assessed at building regulations stage. The fire service do normally, with their consultation responses, do say early to the developers, you should consider using the automatic water suppression systems, etc., because they're a benefit. But that's all done at building regs.
Yeah, however, the developer was nodding his head.
Yes, we have sprinklers for our units.
Councillor Davis.
I understand this proposed development on a floodplain. If that's the case, for the residents will be issued welcome boots.
They might be. So I do have a slide here in case someone asked. Right. So you can see the different, the coloured areas are the areas at flood risk. You can see different levels of risk by the different colours. So it mainly affects the northern building. The report obviously goes into a lot more detail than I can now about the measures that are in place to control and manage the risk. So there being flood action plans about directions of how to exit the building in a flood event. So I don't know if you can quite see there, but the bottom left-hand corner of the northern block isn't within any flood area, so people can get out of that area. The residential units would be above the height of a flood event, so the areas that would be subject to flooding would be the parking areas, and there would be arrangements in place to make sure that if that was to happen, that obviously cars wouldn't start floating downstream.
Councillor Edwards.
Can you put up for me the slide again about the height of the building? Now that, in terms of the buildings there, as I understand it, the Burnt Mill one is actually up, is on a raised elevation compared with the. So does that take that into account, because that looks like it's all on the same, sort of on the same plane?
I appreciate it's difficult to see from that slide, and I had trouble trying to present it. There is a, I guess if you were to say that the ground level of Burnt Mill was 0, you can see that it then reduces down towards the side. My cursor works. You can start to see there that there's a dashed line.
Yeah.
And then that's the solid line is the land level falling away, and that continues down there. So you can see actually where the Toby Carberry is.
Yeah.
You can see the difference in the land levels there.
Yeah.
So the land is actually slightly lower, taken from the Elizabeth Way and Edinburgh Way side, than the Burnt Mill site is.
Yeah. But so what I'm trying to, so what I can't quite get is I can see it in relation to the Pearson building as to how tall it would be in relation to the Pearson building.
Yeah.
But in terms of the scale of it in relation to the 15-storey building.
So you see do you see the dashed line at the top?
Yeah.
So here,
Yeah.
that's the top of the Burnt Mill scheme drawn across.
Including the.
No, so the land height falls away as well. So I suppose if you were to say, so if you were to imagine they were all on the same height, that distance would be slightly less.
Right.
But nevertheless, there's still a big difference. That's what this is trying to demonstrate, that there is a big difference in the heights between what's been approved at Burnt Mill and this scheme.
Because I am concerned about and my reason for asking is that I do have concerns about the height of that building in relation to whether it be the Pearson building or other surrounding buildings. And I was also concerned, picking up on the point that the gentleman was making.
One's 11 story, the other's 6 story.
Yeah. I was also concerned about when one was looking across from the town park. At the moment, one looks across from the town park, and effectively, one talks about where there's the green about green wedges, etc. Effectively, one looks across from the town park, and one can, from looking northwards, you can effectively. Your view is almost uninterrupted in a sense. Yes, there's a bit of the park, the railway car park, and yes, on your right-hand side, eventually there's the Pearson building. But you look across into countryside. That's what you look across into. Whereas if this is constructed, you will look across, and it will be very much a physical built boundary to that edge of the town park. I'm also concerned about the building on floodplain, although I understand from what you're saying earlier that it's not anticipated that will actually have an impact further down other than nibbling away on the building on floodplain. My major.
You've got a question?
Well, that's my question. I was trying to envisage.
I think you're now moving into debate. You've got another question?
No.
Which we will get to shortly.
Sorry.
Anybody else got a question? No. Okay. Debate, members. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. This application is a very marginal application, in my view, not only physically being down in the floodplains, but there are so many other issues connected with it. Not least of which is the 12.2% share of affordable housing. It's not really what we need and not really what we expect. I have to say, I agree with Councillor Edwards. The building is filling a sightline from the town park We saw the pictures earlier of the actual views. We've seen the and now the top one I found horrifying because it shows not only are the buildings going to go in where that red line is, it's actually going to be higher than Longman's house. It's also going to be above the horizon. So, whereas at the moment you have a very good view of the horizon, apart from a little bit by Longman's, you will now lose a substantial part. Now, if you're looking at planning policy BE1, permission will be granted for new development providing it is well connected to and integrated with the wider settlement. The height, massing, layout, appearance and landscape makes an appropriate visual relationship with that of the form, grain, scale, material, details of the surrounding area. Now, to say, Chairman, that application fails on all those grounds. We were, originally I was thinking, well, if they can reduce the height of the tallest one, so it's all level with Longman's, I thought we might be getting somewhere, but having seen this and the views, so tied in with the 12.2% affordable housing, I'm afraid it does fail miserably. The officers have made reference to Mill Court and the 15, 16-storey building. I'm afraid that has no relevance whatsoever. That is a good half a mile away. You can't see it in these photographs, and that was a specific landmark building for the entrance. Also, on one of the other ones, I don't know where it is now, the CGI showed the building from the other side of Edinburgh Way, and the massive, it's not one of those. Yeah, that one. I mean, the massing coming over the top of it's just not in, it's clearly contrary to BE1, and it doesn't have an appropriate visual relationship with the grain scale materials and so forth of the area. So there's also the issues being built on the floodplain. So yes, okay, they're checking the whole thing up by 2 floors to put in car parking underneath. But that increases the cost of building the original buildings, which then squeezes out the affordable housing. So I'm sorry, this will get a no from me.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Clark.
Yes, well, I've got a lot of sympathy with the concerns that have been mentioned, and the chair of the Town Park Users Group, and the discussion that we're having already. One of the main concerns I have is that it's located in a floodplain, and it has a high risk of flooding. It has flooded in the past. There is experience of flooding in the car park, and I appreciate the fact that this would affect only cars, but nevertheless. There have been in the past people paddling up to their knees trying to get to their cars, and a similar situation could arise, and who would really want in their welcome pack what to do in the event of flooding. I mean, it's hardly a sort of real welcome to buying a flat, is it? The other issue of concern is the conservation area, and the questions that have been already raised about the view from the conservation area, looking at it both from north and south sides, and the filling in of the gaps that are with a high levels of and high density along that line. There's a comparison that has been made with the Burnley Mill development that has been that we didn't agree, but was forced on us, as it were. But that's miles away. We're looking at this from the point of view the views from the higher town park, especially that conservation area argument, has been described as providing limited harm, but it still is harm and should be taken into consideration. You argued that it was in the report that it was finely balanced, and I agree, that there is a public benefit. But when one looks at the provision of 12.2% affordable housing, it is a very, very limited public benefit. And that is a disgraceful amount. I know every developers can argue that it's an unviable scheme, and we don't have much strength in the argument, but nevertheless, it is still a puny amount. There is the traffic argument, which I have always argued on all developments north of Edinburgh Way and Elizabeth Way, but it is a serious issue that 66 children and young people have to cross Edinburgh Way every single day to go to school. And also concerns have been raised about the lack of play facilities or opportunities within the actual site. So there are a number of concerns that have been raised already, which I share. But yes, it's on a brownfield site, but we have to take into consideration especially the floodplain conservation area and the impact on the conservation area, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak? Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Chair. We have to find a reason if we're going to vote against this, and I think that comes under BE1, the character and identity of the area. There are other things there. I'm disappointed by the amount of affordable housing, but apparently that'd be okay with the government for that to happen. I'm concerned about the possibility of during the road because of the junction 7A. Traffic will be coming down that route into Harlow or through Harlow, and that may take away land from the town park, as the gentleman mentioned. The floodplain is a problem, and I think it's not really very sensible to actually build in the floodplain. But coming back to a reason, BE1, I would object on the grounds of BE1. Thank you.
Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. I sympathise with just about everything that's been said as being a matter of concern with these buildings. But as I see it, there aren't really any planning grounds on which we can reject it. It will simply go to appeal and we'll lose. So I will be voting for it. But I have to say that the architect for Harlow, Frederick Gibbard, was very concerned that the first view people got of Harlow should be a nice one and credit the town. These buildings could hardly be more hideously ugly, and I hope something can be done to mitigate that when it comes to deciding what materials they should be built of. But this picture here that we've been given is just absolutely ghastly.
Councillor Hardwick.
I'll just pick up on that. I was going to comment on the architecture. It looks more like a superstore block of flats. I think it's a little bit lacking. And that front, of course, that's not a planning consideration here. My view of this application is finely balanced. We've had explained about the car parking, which I think is fairly acceptable. There haven't been that many objections. The conservation point, the officer didn't actually say that Essex Conservation had objected to this. I think the only objection there is. And the explanation he gave as to the lower end of sustainable or whatever is all very confusing. Substantial, all very confusing to us all, and we don't actually know what they mean, but I But then we come to the affordable, and the 12.5% is poor. But having said that, obviously I work in the industry. To put 2 floors of car parking at the bottom of each is very expensive, so I can understand that. Which leaves us, if we were to consider to turn this down, on what grounds? Some have suggested because it doesn't fit in with the area, but I actually went down to the area yesterday, and all of the buildings are pretty ugly down there. There's not really much of architectural merit. So this one will just kind of add to the group there. And I'm really of the mind that we might approve this, because I think it would actually, what the gentleman was saying earlier, actually improve the area and create a kind of little neighbourhood on its own around the station, which I think, well, that's what Harlow was built on, a series of neighbourhoods. So I think it would be quite beneficial to you.
Okay. Anybody else? No. In that case, members, if we could move to the vote, the recommendations which appear on pages 58 to 63 of your papers, recommendations 1 to 19 and informatives 1 to 9. All those in favour? And against? Abstentions? That is carried. Yep, it was 4-3 with 1 abstention. Moving on, anybody that came just for that item, you're welcome to leave